back again to the Being Da podcast. Myself and Doug, as usual. Now, the start of season 2, we did discuss a couple of things. We said we were going to come back to it, and we never did. So
yeah,
we're
I
coming
think
back to it.
those of you who are taking notes and sort of maybe holding us accountable. Well, I haven't seen your comments yet, but the thing in episode 1, I said we'll be looking at the hormonal change in Dad with a really good intention of doing that and getting back to it, but we didn't say when we were going to do it, so we'll do it now. I think it's quite a significant change, and it's something we need to talk about because there's a couple of ideas around that we want to explore. So we've got a good resource to recommend as well.
Yeah. So the change, Doug, how long does this change take, and what is the change?
You start having a change when your partner's pregnant. So It depends on, and a lot of it depends on what is your attitude towards fathering, becoming a father, your attitude towards your child who is busy growing, and that will actually start the change within your hormonal landscape, primarily oxytocin, which is the love hormone, which, as we always kind of refer to as what got you into this position in the first place. But so that is a key hormone around bonding with your partner as well. Yeah,
and I take it this change would be slightly different for dads-to-be who aren't with the expectant mum?
Correct, yeah. So
the change be longer or slower, or not as much?
Not as much. It'll probably be delayed because the groundwork happens, or the initial changes happen when you and your partner have decided to have a baby and that relationship is existing. I just want to say that Joseph and I are not medical experts in this field, but in terms of researching and trying to understand what happens to dads, we come from a world of experience where we see in ourselves, or have seen in ourselves, through having children and through the dads we work with. We've also got a great resource we'll reference, but so the change begins before baby's born, and I think that's one of the key things. We always say, when baby's born, then you'll be a dad.
Yeah, because everybody knows that mum's body goes through a change.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that,
And it's assumed that we don't.
Yeah. And the woman's change obviously is more
pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see the physical changes.
And rightly so.
And we're not taking anything away from that at all. But there is changes in Dad.
Yeah.
His attitude can completely change.
Absolutely.
Towards life. And with testosterone levels, so gents with high testosterone levels have got a higher drop in testosterone when they're going to become a dad.
That's right. So you would think, and we'll deal with the actual drop, but in the discussion around masculinity, but the drop comes, and this was over a long-term study, so it's not just sort of a hypothesis, people going, well, we think it drops, or we know it drops a little bit, but how much and when. But when the change begins with oxytocin, testosterone then will drop when we become fathers. And this long-term study they did in the Philippines, which I think started in 1983, they took a cohort of about 600 men from just after when they were born, and they would do measurements, and I think they did a number of other things, but obviously for our interests today is around testosterone. And they found that through their lifetime, when the men who had the highest level of testosterone before having a partner and having a child, they were the ones who were most likely to be in a stronger relationship. But also when their child was born, their testosterone dropped the most. So there was a huge shift for them. And that is basically how we are primed to become a lot more caring.
Yeah, to help us be more patient with our fatherhood.
More patient, and also sort of competitiveness and aggressiveness is not seen as conducive to be helpful in raising a child. So this is a change that happens, and we'll get back to what that means for men and what we think it means for men. But that is something that happened, and the percentages were quite startling. So part of what they did was they measured testosterone in the morning and in the evening, and they found men who were fathers and in committed relationships with the mother of the child had in the morning a 26% drop compared to a man who was single without children, and in the evenings was a 34% drop, so a third. Now, of course,
and single men only dropped half those numbers.
I think it was 12% and 14% the morning and the evening. So, and that was actually age related. So obviously, as they aged, the testosterone dropped off, and I think that's where a lot of the times we see social media, there's talk about, getting your testosterone back up, and you need to be, to be a man, you've got to have the highest amount of testosterone. And, so does that mean when you're a father, you're less of a man or not a man? Which could be a tricky question, but I think it's relevant, because I think that thinking process is there, that where we think if we have less testosterone, we're less of a man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, because it's not something I ever thought about when I got told I was going to be a father. I didn't really feel the change. I didn't, looking back and doing this research for this episode and thinking back to how I felt before I was ever a father, slight comparisons, I don't know. Would you know?
I felt... I didn't realize this happened, So when I had my first child a long time ago, I didn't know this happened. If you'd said to me your testosterone will drop, I'd be like, "Oh, are you sure? Are you certain of that?" But what I did find was my sensing of danger increased.
Right.
So maybe before, when the testosterone was higher, something would happen and you'd be like, okay, whatever. Slightly dangerous, not a problem. With my children around, I was almost hypersensitive towards danger. And things that before I would have virtually ignored, now I was like, oh, that's a threat, that's dangerous, that car was driving a little bit too fast down the road. They're probably doing like 35 miles an hour and a foot close to the pavement, then they should have been, and you're like, oh, good grief, my child's in danger. So you become a little bit more attuned, but it's very subtle. It's not a sudden drop. It's a very subtle thing. And 6 months in, you're going, oh, I'm actually quite, quite sensitive to danger for my child. But that is the right environment for me then to respond.
Yeah. And while we're doing this research, I had seen that there was a report that said that dads who were separated from their partners and had their kids every second weekend, say, their testosterone was more of a spike, so there would be more of a fluctuation. So their testosterone would drop less when they were on their own, and then it would drop higher when they were with their kids. But it also, the study suggested that some of these dads were quicker to get frustrated.
Right.
And we don't know if that's because of the situation that they're in, or that could be the testosterone spikes and drops. So it was really interesting. I mean, I don't know enough about the subject to really go into it, but
if a father is, sorry to interrupt, but if a father, if there's a breakdown in the relationship, but the father does not see the child and is separated from the mother and the child, then the testosterone levels can recover. Maybe not quite fully,
right?
But they do, and I use recover loosely, so they do head upwards again.
So, Doug, let me just ask you: with the testosterone drop, do you think you're less of a man now that you've became a father and your testosterone's dropped?
No, I don't think I'm less of a man. We get this fixation on, for instance, something that's very masculine, and testosterone, of course, is one of the measures. Of course, women have testosterone too, but it's in a much lower measure. We, of course, in the womb, we are dosed with testosterone, and that's how we become males. We all start off as females, by the way. And as we are dosed, I think there's 4 dosing periods through the pregnancy, and then you become a male. We don't want to enter into the discussion now of gender, but for the sake of this podcast, we're just going to look at that and go with that. And the fact that we get to a single measure of, oh, this is what makes you a man. I mean, it might change your outlook on certain things. And I could see that as a father now, I wouldn't want to be doing anything that is going to harm other people's children. It's going to harm my own children. It's going to harm myself. I still like motor racing, and I still want to get a motorcycle, but that's a different discussion, right? I was just about to say
motorbike.
If our partners are watching this, we've got to be careful. But I don't think it makes us less of a man. We embark on a different path, and we embark on a pathway where we are now nurturing a young person a baby, a child, and teaching them and growing with them and doing things with them. It's not something that makes me less masculine. I think by engaging this, it makes us maybe more masculine, and I hesitate because I don't want to say, well, if you don't have a child, then you're not a man. I don't want to say that at all. That's not where I'm going with that. Yeah. But in terms of the testosterone change, is it hugely tangible? Do I feel it? No. As you were saying, you didn't feel this all of a sudden step off. Mm-hmm. Maybe 6 months in, you go, oh, okay, I see a news article, see a news thing on TV, and it's children suffering, and I might have a bigger pang in me because I'm thinking, these are children who are suffering. I'm attuned to children and their well-being. Mm-hmm. And you see it, and it might impact you more than if you weren't a father. Not to say that if you're not a father, you're heartless and you don't care. I'm not saying that. But it's not this, it's often made out to be this big, terrible thing that happens to you and your testosterone drops, but it isn't.
Yeah,
it's
and
just
something you don't want to lose. You're like,
yeah.
oh, no, I don't want to lose my testosterone.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is we get older, and, we often remember the early days when we were younger with fondness. When I was 20, when I was 25, I could do what I like. I could run places. I didn't run much. You ride your bicycle, you do jumps. You
had hair.
You had hair. Mine was not a two-tone. Mine wasn't a two-tone yet. But we did things that were more dangerous. And yet we go, oh, well, testosterone's to blame. Now I'm a father, testosterone, the drop is to blame that I don't do those sort of things anymore. Partially, yes, but also you age, and it's just natural in the aging process.
Yeah.
I'm not an athlete.
Yeah, you're definitely more cautious, aren't you?
Yeah.
Things. My kids tried to get me on the trampoline the other day. I went on, but I was like,
parts of your body tell you no.
Don't try that move. Don't try. They'll try to get me to jump and then land on my butt. And then for that bounce back onto my feet.
It's when they ask you to do a somersault.
Absolute fear. Yeah. I couldn't do it. I was like, oh no, I'll just stand jumping.
And then they show you how to do it, and they just do it like
don't think
basic as anything.
Confidence.
Yeah.
But before we stray too much, another thing we talk about quite a lot at the antenatal workshop is oxytocin. Mm-hmm. We discussed that a wee bit at the antenatal workshop, and it's normally referred to as the love hormone, and we often say it's the reason you're at the antenatal workshop in the first place. Yeah,
and I think what we tend to discuss almost exclusively at the workshop is how oxytocin impacts your partner, and it's the most important of the chemicals to get going during labor because it helps relax mom, it helps relax baby. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make labor all of a sudden easy and the birth easy, not at all, but it definitely takes labor. Yeah, exactly, but it takes a little bit of the edge off. And I think that we look around how you can try and induce a little bit of an oxytocin hit in your partner. Yeah, we need to
try and maximize the oxytocin, don't we?
And the trick, though, and as we describe, is it doesn't just start when labor begins. Oh, how do I do this? Or what's the magic trick? What do I do next to help induce that? It's the quality of your relationship beforehand. Mm-hmm. It's what you've discussed, how you've thought about and talked about the birth and what you would like, what you like to see. The whole process is building up, and that's why we often say it's best to get this going sooner rather than later. It's not just something you magically do that when labor starts and all of a sudden the oxytocin flows. So engaging your partner, looking at her, do you face her? Do you hold her hand? What have you done up to that point? Have you been doing the massages? Have you brought along some soothing music? Which, by the way, in the labor suite, your partner might just decide that's not what she wants, so it could change. But it's a building up process. It's not just automatically when labor begins. So that's why this kind of puts your relationship in the spotlight. Probably bits of your relationship that may be struggling, to be quite frank. And it's one of those processes where you get to hopefully know each other. So your oxytocin and her oxytocin, they say there can actually be a synchrony between the two, and that's a great environment, obviously, for a baby to then be born into.
So what happens to oxytocin in a man and a woman after the baby's born? They're a wee bit older.
Yeah, they're a little bit older. It's interesting. Again, there's been studies done, and one of the resources we want to point out is this actually really good book called The Life of Dad by Anna Mashin, although in Scotland we say Anna Mackin. I think that we'll adopt that. A really great resource. She covers a ton of things, and including the hormonal changes in dad. And one of the papers that she refers to is how they measured what oxytocin does. So mums get an oxytocin hit when they have a cuddle and some sort of affection with their child. But it's not play. It's not playtime. It's not a playful interaction. It's just a cuddle.
It's more relaxing.
A snuggle.
A cuddle and a ball.
Yeah, and mum's oxytocin spikes, and that's great for her. So dad's oxytocin spikes too, but what that comes from proper rough and tumble play. You know, okay, 6 months you're not doing rugby tackles or anything, obviously. Well, I mean, you shouldn't be, but it's basically the maybe where you're part, you know, that bit where you throw baby up in the air. I mean, I think it's terrifying for mums, and I think generally mums would agree, but dads also agree that it's really a great time. And doing that, it's great for the child to be attaching to yourself, but also you get that spike. And part of the whole thing is oxytocin and testosterone working together to form a bond with your child. That's the important thing. I think also is the beta endorphins. Again, we're not medically trained, so these are things we've researched and we've looked at. And there's a whole mix of these. These hormones very seldom work in isolation. And that's a part of the problem, again, just talking about testosterone the whole time, is that all of these things work together. And that's one of the things they found, is that when there is this goal-oriented and this activity, goal-oriented is, well, I'm throwing you, you're being thrown, and you're going to be caught, and I'm going to catch you. You know, between the father and the child, whether it's male child or female child, that interaction helps generate the bonding, the attachment, and the feel-good hormones and everything together. So good for child, good for parent.
Yeah, definitely. I know we kind of discussed a wee bit there. So we hope we give you some fuel for thought there. Hopefully get something out of this episode of the podcast. And we'll see you next time.
See you on the next one.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.